As infuriating as it was to watch Rebel News reporter David Menzies getting manhandled and arrested by police for merely attempting to ask Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland a question about the Liberals' soft on terrorism policy, I think it was also important for many Canadians to just witness how much the Liberal government has weaponized the police against the independent media and also corrupted other institutions in Canada in order to try and shut down independent media, whether it's their ability to actually report the news or it's their ability to ask questions, like in this instance. Our government is very anti-free speech and pro-censorship, and this clip basically encapsulates the entire issue. Just watch this and see how this police officer seems to, in a rehearsed fashion, run up to David, hits him, and then accuses David of assault so that he can make an excuse to arrest David to get him away from Chrystia Freeland.
Ms. Freeland, how come the IRGC is not a terrorist group? Why is your government supporting Islamo-nationalism? What? Excuse me. What are you doing?
You're under arrest for assault. Why are you pushing me? You're under arrest for assault.
Who are you?
You're under arrest for assault.
Police.
It's completely absurd. You can even see it in David Menzies' face that when the cop bumps into him, he's looking at him like, what's going on here? And then the cop very angrily says, well, you're under arrest for assault. That's assault. It's so rehearsed that you can tell that either Freeland's office or the PMO itself is instructing these officers acting as security for ministers how to get rid of independent journalists. This is not something that this officer probably came up with on the spot. This is obviously something he does in order to prevent certain news outlets from being able to ask questions. And how ironic is it that he's asking a question to Chrystia Freeland as to why they haven't listed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, which is, the terror arm of the anti-free speech Iranian government, and that she's having him arrested for even asking the question. And not to do too much of a shameless plug, but this is exactly why I myself am running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative nomination. There needs to be independent journalists in the next government so we can get rid of all of these stupid pro-censorship, anti-free speech laws that are on the books and make sure that we crack down on this corruption of the police force, that they shouldn't be going after journalists of any stripe. Unless David was harassing her and was following her for 4 or 5 minutes, getting up in her face and bumping into her, there's no reason to arrest him. The reason why he was having to do these sort of these walking talk scrums with the deputy prime minister is because the Liberals do not allow outlets like Rebel, True North, the National Telegraph, the Counter Signal to ask questions during real press conferences. They get them thrown out, and organizations like Rebel and True North have to sue to be able to actually be in the scrum at official debates that go on during the federal election and other sorts of press conferences, both in and outside of Parliament. This is all what David's doing, and people are saying he's being annoying. He should be arrested. Well, if they find that annoying, maybe they should actually let him ask questions during official functions, or maybe she should just turn to him and say, "I don't want to ask questions," or actually maybe answer the question for a change. That would be a thought. This government just seems to just think that media should just always be saying nice things about them. That the job of media is to promote liberal messages. This is why they're trying to fund the legacy media, because the legacy media acts as stenographers for the Liberal Party. They merely say what the Liberal Party said, and they'll have an expert come in and say why it's so correct, and every once in a while they'll let a conservative maybe give a rebuttal, but not often. That's the way that the Liberals think the media should work. It should work like CTV and CBC. They omit anything that the Liberals don't like from a story, and they mostly just give a narrative that promotes whatever the Liberals are doing, despite the facts on the ground saying otherwise, that the reality on the ground is against the narrative that most of the legacy media puts out. This is what makes things like Bill C-11 and C-18 so dangerous. The independent media's only avenue to be able to gain viewers is through social media and platforms like YouTube and Facebook. Yet we have the Liberals trying to shut down all news on Facebook through Bill C-18, trying to extort Meta into paying them $56 million a year to the legacy media outlets, or they don't get to put up Canadian news. My thing is, I actually believe that Trudeau's Bill C-18 was meant to ask Facebook for way too much, to extort them into basically just saying we don't want to do any Canadian news because it costs us too much, and shutting down the entire operation. The CBC and CTV do not benefit that much from being on social media because nobody watches or listens to them in the first place. Obviously, Trudeau would rather just no media be on Facebook because that's where independent media was gaining so much traction. And now Bill C-11 is how he's going to try and corrupt institutions or platforms like YouTube by forcing their algorithm to be able to push Canadians towards Canadian content. There's good, clean Canadian content, which is obviously going to be CTV News, CBC, or independent creators who have a pro-liberal agenda. The National Telegraph, me and Daniel Boardman are never going to get approved as Canadian media. Rebel News won't be considered Canadian media. True North definitely isn't going to be considered Canadian media. What the Liberals consider being like helping independent journalism is helping the individuals who work at the CBC and CTV. They're so weaselly when it comes to their language around the media, and it's been hilarious people going back into Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland's Twitter timelines and finding their pro-independent media comments about how independent journalists shouldn't be facing arrest in other countries and they shouldn't be harassed by governments for holding people accountable. Yet Chrystia Freeland, is she going to release a statement about how, well, I don't think that the police treated David right. I don't like his questions, but he has the right to give me those questions. She doesn't think that. She thinks that anybody that annoys her should be arrested. This woman used to work as a journalist. She used to work as a journalist in Russia, where it actually can be quite dangerous to do journalism. I think she was also in Ukraine. The places where oftentimes freedom of the press is not always guaranteed, and she's totally fine with her own government walking down the same pathway towards tyranny, making it so that only government state-approved journalists get to ask questions. And once something's state-approved, it's no longer legitimate in any way, because the people asking the questions, although they're technically allowed to ask tough questions, are they really, when the government is holding the purse strings and basically determining whether this outlet survives or not, are they going to ask Justin Trudeau tough questions? Just look at the sorts of questions that Justin Trudeau gets from the CBC, CTV, all the other legacy outlets, Global, the Toronto Star. He only ever gets tough questions when a scandal or an issue gets so bad they have to ask, or people will start watching independent media. The legacy media just puts out little droplets of sort of true information in order to make people think that there must be some legitimacy to them, when at the end of the day, what they do is subtle propaganda that moves people into a more liberal frame of mind by reducing the amount of facts that they give throughout their reports, so that when the person puts them all together, they think they're naturally coming to a pro-liberal conclusion, when it was just so that the game was effectively rigged from the start. So the only information that the person was given, or the only substantial information the person was given, would have obviously made them think that the liberals are right. That's why people who watch a lot of legacy media become proud liberals and think that the conservatives only lie or the conservatives are corrupt, because because the lying by omission of the CBC and CTV always makes it seem like the conservatives are up to something. It's Lisa Laflamme on CTV News back in the day. Whenever a conservative would say something, whether she can't argue that whatever they said was wrong, but she rolls her eyes about how ridiculous it is that this conservative said this thing. Obvious propaganda. Anyways, I don't want to ramble on too much, but I hope that this David Menzies episode actually makes both Canadians and international observers look a little bit less favorably into the supposed free speech democracy that Canada has under Trudeau. It is turning very quickly into a very bloated authoritarian government that will rig the rules in order to try and help themselves electorally. Anyways, that should be it for me today. If you want to donate to my legal fundraiser, it's linked in the description below. It's a Give, Send, Go link. I'm being sued by a billionaire. He's trying to basically his lawsuit against myself and the National Telegraph is completely ridiculous. And he's just trying to drag it out in order to hurt us financially because of all the costs that we incur. All the evidence of the case goes in our favor. He basically didn't even submit any evidence when he had to. He was so late on submitting the non-evidence he had. He actually owed me money at one point. But other than that, I'm also, again, running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. So if you live in Calgary Signal Hill, make sure you have a Conservative membership. And if you know anyone who lives in that riding, it's like the west side of Calgary. If you know anyone in that riding, make sure that they get a membership and support me, number one on the ballot, because we need real conservatives and some independent journalists to get into government to make the changes that we need made. I don't want a conservative government getting a couple of big ticket piece of legislation from the Liberals repealed. We need to repeal all of it. There's not an ounce of Liberal legislation that should stay in place. But other than that, I'll see you guys in my next video.